Denial of service. In this nugget, we'll be taking a look at the denial of service. We'll take a look at the definition of a denial of service, as well as some examples of high-profile sites that have been the victim of denial of service attacks. We take a look at the various attack types, such as the SYN flood and many others, and we look at some attack tools, especially the tool that's called the Low Orbit Ion Cannon, which we'll be able to practically demonstrate in a Windows environment. Alright, as we get started looking at denial of service, I'm reminded of my wife. No, not for those reasons. It's because she's actually very difficult to perform a denial of service attack on. You see, she can multitask a million different things at once. She can be thinking about one thing while she's on the phone with somebody and while she's conversing and she's doing something for our kids and she's making dinner and she's typing out an email. Seems like she can do all of these things at once, which would make it very difficult to perform a denial of service attack. But with me, it's easy to perform a denial of service attack on me because I'm very focused and concentrated and I can only seem to do one thing at a time. And if you try to get me to do two things at a time, then I'm just distracted and all, flustered or something like that. So that's kind of how a denial of service attack works as well. It's really an attempt to overwhelm a system with too many simultaneous requests. And let's take a look at kind of an official denial of service definition. And that is an attempt to prevent a computer or service from being available. Now, in certified ethical hacker materials and various definitions on the internet, they're all a little bit different in the verbiage there, but you'll get the idea, and it's pretty obvious what that is. So you just have to understand that that's really what the attempt is here. And some examples of this, of organizations that have had recent denial of service attacks, cover the whole gamut. Obviously, Twitter, Facebook. They have had denial of service attacks performed against them. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how some of these denial of service attacks, or we just call the usually DOS attacks, occur. And this doesn't have anything to do with the old 1980s operating system, which is what I started off with years ago. But this has to do with, of course, preventing these organizations from providing their services, usually through the web. There's also Google and Yahoo. They've both had denial of service attacks performed on them. Probably most major organizations, various credit card companies, banks, and so forth, have at one time had some kind of a denial of service attack. Amazon has had this difficulty, eBay, and many government sites like the FBI and certain other ones. Also, there's an organization called the WordPress. They actually host a lot of different websites and administer them. Well, if you can bring down WordPress, then you're able, of course, to bring down all of the host sites that they perform service for. So that was a big issue that took place not too long ago. And then most recently was Bank of America, which this past summer was considering charging customers $5 a month if they wanted to use their debit cards to make purchases. Well, this resulted in a huge backlash from not only their customers, but also from hackers who immediately performed a denial of service attack against Bank of America. And so it was so effective that even customers that were legitimately trying to access their website to do online banking or whatever could not get through. Or it was very, very slow because of the onslaught of the denial of service attacks that were taking place. Later on, by the way, no surprise here, Bank of America had decided to withdraw their attempt to charge their customers $5 a month for use of their debit cards. Now, there are many methods for performing a denial of service attack, and we can't outline them all because they're so numerous, but here's some of the key ones that you need to know about, the DOS methods. The first one there is the ping of death. This really goes back to, I think it was the mid-90s, somewhere in there, maybe the late 90s, where there were several operating systems that were vulnerable to this. Early, like Windows 95, Windows NT, I think initially was susceptible to this before it got patched to resolve this. So this kind of goes back a ways. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that in certified ethical hacker terms, you still have to know about this because there's no current operating system that I know of that's really susceptible to this. Everything's been patched and so on so that it's not a problem anymore. But if you were to send a ping packet of greater than 65,535 bytes, what that would do is it would overflow the memory buffers. The general result of this would be a machine that would either lock up or blue screen you. And so this was quite disruptive because you could bring down an entire server by doing this. But again, all modern operating systems will prevent this and no longer allow the ping of death. It's just not really a possibility, at least in the way that it was originally performed. For example, if I were to bring up a command prompt here in Windows 7, then you can see that I'm trying to ping maybe my default gateway. This would be a way of performing denial of service, is if I can bring down a critical router in between myself and the destination target. And if I can bring that down, then of course the website on the other side of it's not going to be available, nor are any of the other resources. So I might do a ping, and my default gateway is 10.10.10.1. Minus L is for the size. I don't know why Microsoft made this L for size. I would think S would make a better option. But anyway, there you go. It's a minus L. And then I just entered in anything bigger than the number I wrote up here, 65,535. So let's say 70,000. What's it tell you when you try to enter that in? You can't. In fact, it only lets you ping smaller than the ping of death size. Okay, so if I try to do 65,500, it will allow it, but anything larger than that, if I even go one larger, it just won't let me. The same would be true even for hacking operating systems such as Backtrack. If I try to ping 66,000 to the same destination there, here we have a count. I'm going to send it up a count of 4. Otherwise, it'll ping indefinitely in Linux operating systems. And then a -S, that's for size. That makes more sense, doesn't it? 66,000. And again, it's not going to even let me do that. The largest I could go would be 65,507. So 65,507, and that's the most it's going to allow me to do. Another type of attack that could take place would relate to this SYN packet. So you could have a TCP SYN attack, which I don't really have up here, or you could have a SYN flood. They both work in a similar fashion. Normally, these are going to be what we call distributed denial of service attacks. You see, something like the ping of death, I can have a single attacker attacking a single destination and make that work if it's a really old, crusty operating system at least. But with something like this, I have a distributed denial of service attack, which means that I'm able to control an untold number of zombie computers and have them simultaneously attack my target all at once. I have a graphic that will illustrate that a little bit better later on. But here we would have something going on like the three-way handshake. Now, remember, in the three-way handshake, the sender sends the SYN packet, then the target will reply with a SYN ACK, and then the third part of the three-way handshake is that the sender will reply with an ACK, and then data normally occurs, and it has an ACK with all of the data packets that are sent. Okay? What happens with something like a SYN attack or a SYN flood is that the SYN is sent, fine. The SYN ACK comes back, well, that's fine. But then this ACK, for whatever reason, never actually arrives. So the target computer is leaving these half-open connections. Now, just one might not be a big deal, but when you start to have thousands and thousands of those all coming across, then it's going to hold memory open for all of those half-open connections, expecting to complete a connection, and eventually you're going to deplete the memory resources or the buffers that it has available for handling networking, and then it's just going to lock the network up and it won't be able to communicate properly, shutting down the website or whatever else it is that you're trying to prevent. The reason why this ACK never arrives is that it might be programmatically designed that way so that a hacker tool might never send an ACK. It just doesn't. Or the SYN could be sent from a spoofed IP address, and this can programmatically also can be randomized. So that let's say my IP address ends in, whatever .7, okay? But I'm sending out thousands of spoofed IP addresses from .6 and .5 and all these different subnet ranges and all these different things from around the globe is what it looks like. And then now my web service trying to answer all of these clients that look like they're coming from who knows where all over the world, and it's never able to get a response from any of them because the SYN packet is spoofed. And it has all these fake IP addresses in it. So when the SYN ACK is sent back, it's sent back to an IP address that never actually requested that traffic in the first place. And if that's the case, then they will just never answer. And so it never receives this ACK. As a result, depleting the memory it has reserved and eventually resulting in a denial of service. Other kinds of DOS methods you might see would be the ICMP flood. Now remember, a ping is an Internet Control Message Protocol type of a message, and what we do with this is you'll use a Smurf attack. At least that's what it's called. That's not a technical term. But the effect of what it does is it sends a packet to the broadcast address, often with the source address of the victim. So let's just go ahead and take a look at how that might look. Let's just draw this out real quick. Let's say that I am the attacker over here, all right? And then here is a network that I'm trying to attack, okay? And in particular, maybe there's a server right here. But there's other hosts on this network as well, represented by, these circles here. All right, so there's several different hosts on there. Now, the network ID, let's say it's 192.168.1.0, and it's on a Class C subnet mask. So if I were to send a message out to the broadcast address of this network, and we're on a typical Class C network, what would that be? I would send a ping packet or some kind of a message to 192.168.1.255. Okay, and that's because if you look at this in binary, all of these bits would be turned on. There'd be 8 bits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that will be the broadcast address of this entire network. Now, sometimes broadcast messages are legitimately sent out when we don't know who the host is that we're looking for and we're trying to find the appropriate host. But you usually don't have a flurry of those going on at once. So if I'm the attacker, I could send thousands of messages to the broadcast address. Now, is that bad by itself? Now, maybe not. But what the key with this is, inside of this packet, it has the source as coming from my web server here, whatever server this is. Let's say that they're on .7, okay? So the source IP address is coming from, it looks like it's coming from 192.168.1.7. And what's going to happen then is when all of these other hosts on the network receive this Smurf attack to the broadcast address, they'll see that the source is this host right here. They're all going to simultaneously respond to that host. And if you multiply this times thousands of hosts all replying to the same IP address, which has been forged in this ICMP packet, then it's going to bring that server down. But it just can't respond to all of those hosts constantly and indefinitely. And I said there might be thousands of hosts over here. Really, it's not probably going to happen in an Ethernet network because of Ethernet limitations. But maybe you've got another subnet over here as well, and maybe this is on 192.168.2.0, and the broadcast here would be .2.255. Okay, so you can still send the broadcast out over here with the same source, and then all of these hosts over on this network would also go back and attack that host as well. So you can combine the effects of multiple networks at once, kind of able to compound the effect of the attack. Another kind of an attack you might get here, which is similar to the Smurf attack, would be a snuggle attack. A snuggle. How did I come up with snuggle? I know I must have combined Smurf and Fraggle and come out with Snuggle. But anyway, it's a Fraggle attack. Oh, the only thing that could be worse than the Snuggle attack would be the Tickle Torture attack. Anyway, the Fraggle is the same thing as a Smurf attack, except that it uses UDP packets, whereas a Smurf attack would use TCP packets. Another attack you might see out there would be something called the ping flood. And this is just an overwhelming amount of ping requests, and it's especially effective if the attacker has a higher bandwidth than the target. Now, this is going to be easy to accomplish if you have a distributed denial of service attack that's doing the ping flood, because then you have the concatenated bandwidth of untold different zombie hosts out there all pinging a destination target at once. Now, before we move on to talking about the various tools that can be used for a DOS attack, we have to ask the question, why would we even want to do this? Well, one of the reasons why would just be vandalism, and that's one of the common reasons, and most common reasons, would be vandalism or hacktivism. Vandalism, of course, we just want to bring it down. We just want to see if we can, or we just don't like the company. We may also be hacktivists, so that we don't like what the company has decided to do. Maybe we don't like a charity that they support. Maybe we don't like the way they do business. For example, WikiLeaks is in financial trouble right now because PayPal has cut off funding so that you cannot donate through PayPal to WikiLeaks. So what happened here is hacker groups out there have then attacked PayPal, performing denial of service attacks against them, and it was somewhat effective for a period of time. And so this was kind of a political hacktivist movement when the attack against PayPal happened. The other reason might be for redirection, and for this I put up kind of a small little diagram down here. Let's say that this is the real environment that we have. We have a legit DNS server which points to, www.nuggetlab.com. Okay, so when we have clients out here that put www.nuggetlab.com in their web browser, we want this DNS server to resolve that to an IP address for nuggetlab.com, and eventually pops up in their web browser. Fine. Okay, everything's working just great. However, if we have a fake nuggetlab.com, maybe it has a form in it where we can accept people's credit cards or, I don't know, social security numbers or other kinds of sensitive information, and we want to direct people to our fake nuggetlab.com, how could we do that? Well, we have to, first of all, knock this DNS server off somehow. So that would be a good target for a DOS attack. And if we knock down its IP address, for example, maybe it ends in, I don't know, .8, then if we're on the same network or have the ability to spoof it properly, we can bring this DNS server up as .8 as well. And now, since this one's not even able to respond to requests, we might have even blue screened it or completely locked it up. Now this one comes up online, and it's going to have the .8 IP address, and my clients are now going to be resolving against this DNS server. Guess what? This DNS server doesn't resolve and point to this nuggetlab.com. No. This one points to the fake nuggetlab.com, which is going to steal people's credit card information and stuff. And by the way, while I'm here, let me talk briefly about another thing that sometimes comes up in certified ethical hacker items, and that is, again, getting people to a fake website. How does that happen? If you're in an email, maybe we talked about email, I think, recently, maybe in the last nugget, and you get an email that looks like it's from nuggetlab.com, and it says, click on this link to get more information, and it might say on here, nuggetlab.com. I won't spell the whole thing out. But if you hover your mouse over that, you might see that it doesn't really resolve to nuggetlab.com. It goes to bit.ly and then / some convoluted number. Or it might even actually point, when you hover over it, it might actually show an IP address of 9.78.6.4 or whatever. Some other IP address instead. Most of the time, if you get an email that has an IP address in the link, instead of the actual name, the resolvable name of the host, that's usually going to be some kind of a spam message or a phishing message. In fact, Microsoft Outlook, if it sees an email message with a link in it that points directly to an IP address, it usually puts it in the junk email folder. Now, the other thing we could do here is we could depend upon people not being able to spell properly, which in today's world of text messaging and stuff like that, where we abbreviate nearly everything, that's becoming increasingly common. So, for example, nugget is spelled with 2 G's, right? But what if someone were to type into their browser www.nuggetlab.com with 1 G? Well, we might legitimately register nuggetlab.com with 1 G in it, and then anybody who types that into their browser is going to go to my fake website, and I can do whatever I want to from that point. I might have a malicious payload in there, or malicious links, or something like that. But anyway, getting back to DOS, these are the main reasons. Again, vandalism, hacktivism, or redirection to a fake site is very often the reason why, especially as it relates to websites. You can also redirect to, maybe a fake Active Directory server, so you can collect people's logon credentials and things like that. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at some common tools that are used in denial of service. One of the common tools that can be used for denial of service would be an older tool called Trinity, for example. This actually uses Internet Relay Chat, or IRC. Now, how is that effective? Well, that's primarily used in a distributed denial of service attack, or a DDoS. Okay? How does a distributed denial of service attack work? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have a graphic that I brought up here to show this to you. I was going to put this in my little whiteboard drawings, but there's too many computers and stuff to show you. Also, in these computers, you can't see it because it's probably too small, but I found this kind of interesting. This was done with Visio 2010, and Microsoft has put in there these convenient little pictures of these like 1988 PCs. And if you zoom in on this, if you're able to look at the original graphic, it has both a 5.5 and a 3.25 inch floppy drive. Is that right? No, it's 5.5 and 3.25 inch floppy drive. I get them mixed up now. It's been so long since we worked with floppies. But anyway, we have these old computers here. I decided to put an iMac in there as well to look a little bit more modern. But we have an attacker and we have a victim. Now what I'll do in advance is I want to set this up so that I'm able to remotely control multiple hosts. Maybe there's a couple of different zombie hosts in different IRCs. Okay, IRC2 down here, IRC1 up here. And what'll happen here is, normally for something like this with zombies, you'd have to kind of create a list and keep track of all of the different zombies that you were controlling. But with IRC, they will not all appear in the same chat room. And then you can send messages to each one of them, and then you can remotely control all of these from a chat room. So that was kind of the original idea there with Trinity. And then what I would do is, at a time of my choosing, I could send instructions and I could say, okay, everybody attack this victim right now. And I could send it to both of these networks at once, or both of these chats at once, and then they would both send out that attack. So that was one of the tools that you could use, would be Trinity. Again, it was kind of groundbreaking because of its use of IRC. There's also Are You Dead Yet, better known as Rudy for the acronym. This is actually a Python script, and it abuses HTTP web form fields, and it's able to search websites for these form fields, and then what it'll do is it'll inject a custom byte into that post field. Okay? Once that has taken place, that application thread just kind of falls asleep, and it just leaves it open, and it never actually gets the a response that it needs to have. And you can send out thousands of these requests per minute, lots and lots of these. So it's just kind of one way of performing the denial of service attack. There's also a tool here called Tribe. It's actually kind of a multifaceted tool. It can use an ICMP echo flood, a UDP flood, SYN flood, or a Smurf attack. And it actually allows the attacker to use several hosts at once to flood that target in a distributed denial of service attack. There's also Slow Loris. Now what this one is it's kind of, I don't think you can see this on the exam in particular. It's written by a hacker named RSnake, and it abuses the handling of HTTP request headers very, very slowly. What it'll do is it injects one custom header at a time into the website, and then it goes to sleep, and it just kind of sits there. The web server keeps waiting for the line space that's supposed to come after that, and it just never comes. And so it's got a big problem with that. Fortunately, for IIS 7, it's already not vulnerable to this. They didn't have to patch or anything like that. It was just never vulnerable to Slow Loris. But many other versions of Apache and several other websites are vulnerable to Slow Loris. I haven't shown you anything for a while. Let me just show you an example of it. This is a Perl script, and you just run Perl slowloris.pl. If you've got you got to download it. You can get it from a number of different places. Actually, I think I put that in the study guide if you want to download this. And then you specify the DNS name. In my case, I'm just specifying a local host that I have over here that's running a web services, and you press enter, and it just builds these sockets. And then it sends them to sleep. So it kind of opens up a bunch of sockets, and then it never really uses them. And you can kind of see here, it does nothing. That's really what denial of service attacks do, is they just do nothing. And that's really where the crux of the problem is. And really, this is kind of an example of a web server just about literally dying of suspense, because it keeps waiting and waiting for these threads to complete, and yet nothing ever happens. It's kind of like it just keeps saying, hey, I promise you I'm going to do thousands of things, and then it just sits on the couch and doesn't do any of it. Might as well be called a teenager, I guess. The next tool here would be something called a low orbit ion cannon. And this tool I'm just going to demonstrate for you. It's a Windows tool, and boy, it's just loads of fun. Okay, so here is the low orbit ion cannon, and I've also got a link there where you can download it. I didn't actually get this website to work, so I don't know what the deal is with that. Maybe it's under denial of service attack at the time I tried to get there. But anyway, what you do with this is you simply enter in a URL or a specific IP address, either one you want, and then you click lock on. Then what you'll do is you specify a timeout, which by default is 9001. That's a plenty of time. You don't have to really do much with that. The threads, I think by default is like 10. But put in an absurd number there. I put in 1,000. And then you can specify how fast to make this. All right. I also sent a message in the packets here. It's called No Certificates for You. Why? Because the website that I'm attacking is my own certificate server. And if you take a look at the URL here, it's dc1.accusource.local. And then if you have a web-based certification authority, it ends in cert SRV by default. Okay, so that's my certification authority web server, and I could do a lot of things with this. I could request a certificate, and then I could say I want a new user certificate for security purposes. I might use it to sign email, for example. A lot of different types of things. But as I go back home here, let's see what would happen here if I were to run this low orbit ion cannon against this server. By the way, this server is fully patched. It's got updates as of yesterday. So let's see how effective this is. Alright, so then what you'll do is once you got this all ready, you click I'm a charging my laser. Okay, if you shouldn't have to guess what that really means. But anyway, now look how many requests we're sending out here. I can't even look at the number. It's just going by too fast down here at the bottom. And if I try to now access this same website, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but it'll slow down at the very least if I request a certificate. Notice the last time I went there immediately. Now notice that it's kind of slowing down a bit. Now I want to go. Let me go back again and do it again and see how it's looking. These will kind of accumulate, and over time, this website will start working slower and slower until eventually it's probably at a point of a complete denial of service. Okay, now I clicked on home. Okay, this is, you see, it's taking longer now. I request a certificate again. Now notice how I'm waiting longer and longer, and eventually this will just choke down. In fact, it may be pretty close to choke down right now. It's just, okay, see, look, now I'm getting not responding. So I've been able to do a successful denial of service attack through whatever 1 billion different requests at it killing this server. This is just so much fun, I can't even begin to say. And it's so easy. I better stop flooding before I bring that server down, because that's also where I'm storing my videos. So I better make sure that I don't do something that damages everything. You also have to be careful of some of these low-orbit ion cannon tools and some of these other hacking tools, because when you're using them to attack somebody else, sometimes they will also inadvertently affect your own TCP/IP stack or your own ability to communicate legitimately. When I was running the low-orbit ion cannon there, it really slowed down my recording ability, in fact, and I had to wait about 5 minutes before it would actually even save the video that I just recorded where I demonstrated that tool to you. I don't know if that's because it's processor intensive or whatever. I'm pretty sure it was, because yesterday when I was running it, all 4 CPUs that I have were all pegged at 100%. So anyway, I decided to run a Wireshark capture as well while I was running this. And that's another thing. When I tried to stop the capture, I must have clicked on stop 10 or 12 times and it would not stop. It just kept capturing packets again, because some of these hackers' tools will also affect the hacker in an inadvertent way, because they're not all smoothly designed and everything, and you know, sometimes they're a little bit dirty. Anyway, you can see some of the packets that were captured, and here's the actual bytes. You know, no certificates for you. You can see over to the far right. And this goes on and on, by the way. This is a really long bytes section. Normally they're not quite this big in most cases, but you see there's quite a bit of bogus IP length data there. Also, as I scroll down here, notice that here, if we take a look at from the source, or actually the source here is the server that I was attacking, and the destination is the machine that was running that hacking tool, low orbit ion cannon. We see here that towards the bottom, oh, where did it go? I just saw it. There's one. Down here, it says that this is a, well, there it is. This frame acts a segment we have not seen. So this again is where you can send out, you can trick the three-way handshake process, where it's sending out information that it didn't expect to see, and so it doesn't know how to respond properly to it. In this nugget, we took a look at the denial of service, or DOS. With this, we started off with the definition, which is an attempt to prevent a computer or service from being available. And then we took a look at some various examples and types of attacks that could be used. We also took a look at the various attack tools and concluded with a demonstration of the low-orbit ion cannon, which is able to successfully bring down many, many websites. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.